depending on where you're joining us from today. We are worldwide, including with our presenters. My name is Eileen Goldberg with LCI staff, and I will be your moderator today for our first webinar in the exhibitor preview series from Nialli, From Sticky Notes to Smart Tech, the Future of Lean Planning. Our webinar will be presented today by Laura Avery, Steve Hawthorne, and Alan Boycu, two of them from Nialli and one of them from Mace Group. There's a couple of housekeeping items I'd like to go over before we get started. The first is this is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be available on our Congress website, congress.leanconstruction.org. Go ahead and go down to the exhibitor logos, and you will see Watch Webinar under the Nialli logo when the webinar has been processed. You'll notice the questions box at the bottom of your control panel. Please put any questions that you have in that box. They'll be answered at the end of the presentation. In your control panel, you'll notice the red arrow to the left of your control panel. That's the minimization and maximization arrow. Please feel free to use that throughout the presentation so you can view the presentation more closely. Again, this is being recorded. A copy of the recording will be available on the Congress website. If you scroll down to the logos, you'll see under the Nialli logo, Watch Webinar as soon as it's ready. You'll see the long skinny box on the right-hand side of your screen, minimization and maximization arrow, as well as the questions box. Please put any questions you have in that box. They'll be answered at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Laura. Thanks, Laura.
Awesome. Thanks, Eileen. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining our webinar today. Just before we get over to our discussion with Steve and Alan, I did want to let everybody know where you can find us at LCI Congress. We're going to be at booth 406. It's right by the exit. And we highly encourage you to stop by this year because we've got some exciting new product announcements to share with you. We have just launched a fully reimagined web-based experience of Nialli Visual Planner. And this has been a long time in the making, but it's taken our application from being a Windows-based product that had to be downloaded to now being able to be accessed on any browser-based device. So lots of new excitement and enhancements coming to our platform this year. We definitely encourage you to come check us out. And visit us at the upcoming LCI Congress show. So from there, I'd like to turn it over to Steve and Alan. Steve is our guest speaker today, joining us from the UK with Mace. He's a director of operations there and has been a longtime advocate of lean construction and the last planner system. And then from our side, we have Alan Boycu, who is our product design director at Nialli, who will be asking Steve some insightful questions to share a little bit more about his lean planning journey. So I'll turn it over to you, Alan and Steve. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura, and good day to everyone, wherever, as Eileen said, wherever we might find you, and thanks for tuning in. So we're going to start with Steve. Why don't you tell us a little bit how it's always interesting to find out how people got into construction and your focus on lean and digital tools, and why don't you just give us a little of your background and your journey and how you got to today.
Oh, thanks, Alan. Yeah, it's a 42-year-old journey, so I'll need to remember quite a bit of it. It goes back to T-boy on a construction site and sweeping up, and then working my way through to carpentry, and then perhaps in the very late 80s, running my first project as a site agent. And around about the mid-90s, we got involved with what we called in the UK the Sir John Egan demonstration projects, and this was an attempt to sort of monitor progress, monitor lean, find out about productivity, where we were losing the downtime. And these were several projects around London that were all communicating with each other and finding the best ways of producing wastage or reducing wastage, and finding efficiencies in the construction process. And it did highlight that we were fairly inefficient. And I think that was probably in '95. That was probably the start of my journey into the lean process. And that all went through Probably accumulating round about sort of the mid 2017. I'm now project director, and I was asked to look after a package of £25 million, which was like 25,000 stones going on to 5 buildings in Chelsea. We had signed up to a 2,000 stone output, which really sort of like needed some support from Mace, and I went to man-mark that particular package and use all my lean knowledge to try and find out how they would get up to 2,000 stones, and basically 88 masons had to turn around either 5 or 12 times a day and have a stone handed to them if they had to walk at all. You know, you just were never going to get those outputs. And we slowly grew that up, and I think around about April 2018 we achieved 2,006 stones in that week, and it was almost like continuous from there on, which was a fantastic output. And there's so many ways that, you know, tools that had to be deployed, and then that's we were still at, we'd gone from paper post-it notes to magnetic post-it note, the same size as post-it. So we were started cutting them in half to try and get half days and efficiencies in that. But there were some fantastic sessions where we had the relevant people from predominantly that facade package in the room to try and say, like, how do we get this 5-day activity into sort of 3.5 or 3 or 2.5, you know, and iron out all of that wastage. And it was really sort of like a baptism of fire. And I think from that point on, I remember I went to my next project, which was like a £57 million project, and I didn't have all the budget that I'd had in that £500 million previous one. So I started to look at some of the efficiencies in what else could we do, and that's where I first got my Nialli screen and the post-it notes, and I think it was called Span then, and started to do this more on the digital world versus the post-it world, and the journey continues through from probably when we first met, you know, Alan, very not far not long after that, and all the way up to what you probably can see behind my head, which is sort of like 300-inch screens where, you know, we have 30 can have 30 operatives all the last planning together, and it's a fairly sort of like summary of
it's a great it's a great and it's a great setup that you have there. I have been in your planning room, and so you know, you just mentioned the word operatives. Let's focus there a little bit. You know, one of the things that you've talked about is this setup you have actually encourages engagement, for example. It's present. Why don't you talk a little bit about engagement and bringing individual people and plans together, sort of in the scope of, you know, collaboration, how you enable or how do you encourage collaboration via digital tools and other things, of course.
Yeah, I think worth noting that Mace have a supply chain of specialists, and we provide a management service to them. So we will win the project, and we will deliver it through their skills, and how we facilitate them and how productive they are and how profitable they are very much how much we facilitate them. So we use a 2-weekly work plan, which has been in lean deployment for 20 years that I've used it, and this is basically forcing each of that supply chain to say, right, how did this week go, and what were those variances? What are you planning for next week, and are you really ready? And what, touching on the following week after that, is there anything we really need to do? And they're quite used to that piece of paper. What I think actually happens there is you've got a coordinated program that all comes in a journey, and it's sort of like we all know what's got to happen in the next 6 to 8 weeks. But just in the sort of week before we start, we unbundle it all, we separate it into different work plans that don't talk to each other. And I was an advocate of saying, right, we need to bring them back together again in areas. Will they actually be able to do all of that together? And that's where we started using the post-it notes, and now where we start to use Visual Planner to say, right, you know, can those 12 activities happen on that day? Because they're not going to look at each other once it's separated out. And that was almost like, to me, all last planning comes down to what's going to happen tomorrow, the next day, and the next day. But also, I've been an old site manager and senior site manager, and I do know that there's various levels of capability in that role, and some of them may just walk around the site and chat away to the individuals and have a lovely day and not actually influence the output as much. And I've always looked at sort of like this, the percentages I get out of Visual Planner, and sort of like, can you get over 80% of what you planned for the next week? How visual is that? Who's letting you down and why? What are those reasons? And it's like almost getting a scan of their brain and their ability. And even they like that, you know, they're coming in at 4 o'clock and they have a 10-minute slot and they sort of like present today, and they're not allowed to delete any of these tags. Like, and they compete over 84%, 85%. That's their sort of like day, you know, justification of how good they are. And I have a sort of like say, the further you can predict accurately, the better of a manager in my team. And I'm deployed sort of like 7 or 8 at any one time on the projects. This one's like £170 million project. So there's a lot of people out there having to sort of like show me that they're actually having all these trades. So they bring them all into a room together. We do this like once a week after we've received all their 2-week work plans. Sometimes we'll have specific focus sessions, and the supply chain find it a very simple way to use to get that last plan together. And I think it benefits them because then they can give us their constraints and we can make it more ready for them.
That's interesting that they're competing, you know, about their PPC. So like sometimes the term co-opetition is used, which is friendly, you know, it's friendly competition, cooperative competition.
Yeah.
So you almost need, like, there becomes an accountability there, and like there's other aspects of engagement. And you know, you and I talked a little bit, and there were a couple other items, and you know, things like trusting each other to get work done, trusting each other that, you know, and the transparency that you talked about. I can see the transparency on the wall. That's what I'm promising to do. Why don't you talk a little bit about that people side of becoming a great team, I guess it is.
Yeah, and I think that's perhaps where I can see sometimes the lights coming on in my management and the subcontractors management to say, right, so we are calling this a 5-day activity. Let's just talk us through hour by hour, you know, why is that like that? Do we all understand it? What's our outputs? What are we asking from the individuals? Actually, can that just be, you know, why is it 4 hours to put on a bracket on a wall? And then you find out that they know when they have a torque check from the engineer at the end of it to see that it's all been done correctly, and they're allowing in there for the fact that that person might take 2 hours to react. You know? And you start to say, well, let's just see, let's phone him up now and see if he'll give you a half hour to react. And then the next thing, you've managed to get that down to 2 hours, and you multiply that by 5 elevations. 20 elevations over 5 buildings. It's a lot of improvement. And each of the times, and when we broke down, we did a time and motion, and we broke down activities into like 10 parts, and we started to bring the supply chain in and saying, what's our improvement ideas for this? What could we do for that? What could we do? And it became their plan. It became their solution. It was alongside ours. And some of it was unjustifiable. So I was saying, like, come on, we're talking 5 hours and you're just stretching 3 meters of DPM. Let's just, and it's the add risk in. But once it's all unbundled and we all agree together and we all work together, it's amazing how quickly that can actually go. Yeah, so I think it is transparent, and it becomes everybody's plan. It's one plan for all of us.
Yeah, you just said something that's really important that we don't hear very often, because sometimes, you know, we hear that, hey, I got to be in control of the project, and you've let go. You've let it be their project, their thing. I mean, you're the how you say, the conductor, but you're saying they own this song. You know, they own this project. That's really fascinating. How do you get everybody to do that? Because we hear, oh, just tell me what to do.
So I think probably a tool I've used throughout my life is that even though I probably have a pretty good idea how that's going to go, if it's their plan, they will embrace it. They will show you that it can be done.
Right.
They will own it, and they don't want it to be my plan. And that's why I stand back, and everybody gets their input, and then I summarize it, and it very much sounds like how I would have done it when I was a carpenter or a site manager or a project manager. But it's an easy way of saying, well, first of all, you now know you all understand it, and you've all talked about the outputs. Hearing somebody phone up a tile or a slater on a roof and say, right, 40 tiles per square metre at this sort of rate, what would be you a good day? Oh, I've done it, and they start to get a pride in it. And I remember seeing some of these masons, because we had at one stage 88 masons and 88 mates all working on that project, and you used to go around doing the count on a Friday and say, oh, Steve, come back in an hour, I'm going to get 3 more on before I go home. I mean, this is 4:30 on a Friday. They're starting to compete with each other, and little bits of ownership in that, and it became targets, and it's all obviously it has to be safe at the same time, but their outputs that they committed to, and they had a little league table going between them, and there was a sweepstake about the count for the whole week, and everybody was involved in it. And I think the email used to go out on a Friday evening to something like 1,200 people, all wanting to know what that stone count was. It created that sort of like atmosphere of togetherness, and it became everybody's plan, and we had good weekends, we had bad weekends, and yeah, it's tremendous when everybody succeeds together.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. It's almost like that. That's almost like a North Star. Can I get this team owning it?
Yeah, and that's amazing. A little cheap trophy out of the local shop that was everybody got to own it for the weekend.
Nice,
yeah,
nice.
Yeah.
So let's just shift now, because part of our title is, you know, smart tech, the future of lean planning. Can you give us some of your just forecasts or thoughts about where smart tech could go to actually make things even, you know, better? It's a little away from the human side, but let's just talk about the tech and some of your experiments, especially that you can share with the audience, because they're pretty interesting.
Yeah, so we probably, I think I was with somebody yesterday, we were counting up like 30 different technologies in this single project, and the true terminology of AI is it has to be doing some of the thinking for you. So like we will put in cameras into our hoist and use a thing called smart hoist, and it doesn't necessarily mean that hoist's best journey will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It will be, you know, at that time of the day, you're going to go 1, 2, 7, 8, 11, and that will be the most effective way, and that will have the least amount of standing time. And that's where you're starting to find that, you know, that having a computer or an algorithm in the background making some of those calculations for you, you start to see little minor improvements in what you're doing. And also watching out for PPE, making sure that people have got their hats on and their gloves on, starting to use that sort of technology. We even used real-time location sensors on this project, where we could see where people were on a 3D model. And I can see a future not that far away, whereas I will have a 3D plan for the next day that I've decided in my daily activity brief, and not necessarily 10 or 12 2Ds, but one 3D. And that's where I expect to see people the next day. And if I have a real-time location sensor that puts them in those positions, and you can see that the operatives have turned up. And I've always said to people, if my site team, if they're not making phone calls before 8:30, you're never going to see those individuals that day. You'll see them the next day, and that's a complete lost day. But we do that in a 2D, and we do it in a manual way. And we have a thing in Mace called the golden hour. My team are out there between 8 and 9 in the morning, making sure everybody's set up and everything's going as planned, and everybody knows that we're present. We don't have any meetings through that time. But actually, you know, we also have a desire to try and reduce our prelims by 30% over the next sort of period of time to be established, but using some of this technology to say, you know, my plan versus actual is sort of like real time. I can see these people moving around, I can see where they are. We don't know their names. That will be electricians 1 to 30, carpenters 1 to 50, all for GDPR in the UK. But it's actually really interesting to, we also say, well, if you're not in the same place for more than 5 minutes, have you really been productive? You know, why are you not staying there for like 3 or 4 hours? Have you got not enough information, materials, fixings? Where is your store? And that starts back to this John Egan demonstration project. We had to have not too many fixings, just exactly the amount of fixings, exactly the amount of material, the plan on the wall, the inspiration in the individuals, the desire to complete. And we start to do that, and I can see a future where that is going to be the real-time location sensing and real-time planning, and right away I can see almost like red dots where I'm not succeeding in the plan, and that might be, for me, the topping on the cake.
Yeah, it's showing constraints in the plan, whatever the case may be. Well, it's an interesting sort of experimentation you're doing, because most analytics that people are familiar with are things that have already happened. You know, that data, and well, PPC's like that. Here's what we said we were going to do. Here's what we got done. And now you're talking about using data preemptively, like rather than reactively. You're actually being, you know, predictive or understanding beforehand and using data. Like, tell me your thoughts about what you foresee in terms of, you know, you're talking about BIM models, and I know the UK is quite advanced in that area.
Yeah. So we deploy, especially in projects like this where we're on a retrofit world. This is where a client has his desire, and in the UK, the higher the ceiling, the better the feeling. And you're getting right close to the structure in most cases. But probably if you haven't added the scan to the BIM model to understand what you've got versus what you want, and the technology are now coming out where they can be seen in the same world, so I can actually see 2D, I can see 3D, and I can see my scan in the same space. That's given me and my team a very effective output. We can see as you walk around with an iPad, we have 178 different risers with different things in each riser. You wouldn't expect your managers to know exactly what everyone does. Having that technology just makes you more effective in the workplace. And now they're put into a cache and they're using the gaming technology, because drawing technology can be a bit hit and miss, whereas this gaming technology is so smooth, you can actually spin it around. And I've seen massive conversations and decisions being made in the basement 3 of this building that would have been a sort of little workshop on old money, and that's where I start to see some of this technology giving us a real good head start.
Yeah, you're going to be sitting in your office moving avatars around, you know, the way you're talking.
So there is actually a consultancy here, and when I won this project, it was an American company, the name escapes me, who actually, we were avatars in reception, and they meet the client in reception as designers, and they go for a site walk through that BIM model, and I managed to convince them to let me join it for the bit of this job, and I went into my client's reception. I had the VR goggles, and all the other team had little icons holding the laptops, and we took a snapshot of this client's very unique reception. And I'm sure to this day he doesn't realise how much technology was involved in that. And what was really funny is my team started to wander around the model, because they're thinking, we've never done this before. And there was a button there that said gather, and I used to press it, and it says, Steve, it took me 10 minutes to get to the basement 3, that thing I wanted to look at, and now I'm back next to you. That was too much power. I was told to stop pressing that button. But that's so great. That's 3 years ago I bid this job, probably 3.5 years ago. That snapshot went into this bid. So it's there. I've not used it since, but some clients, I think it's Buell Happold from memory.
Something to learn there.
Yeah,
it's really
absolutely.
Interesting. I think we should just take a quick little pause and see if there's any questions that might take us into other topics. Eileen, have any questions popped up, or does anybody have any?
Yes, as a matter of fact, there are some.
Oh, good.
So they're quite, there's a lot of questions in this first one. So I'm going to, read very carefully and slowly. So if you need me to reread it, let me know. How many subcontractors do you have on this project that you were referring to, Steve? Do all of them use and support Last Planner system? How did they react on it in day one? And how did you convince them to use LPS and Nialli Visual Planner?
Oh, good question.
Yeah, so total probably we peaked at 650 operatives. We have 2 buildings and probably 32 to 36 different subcontract companies in here. They are all used to using the 2-weekly work plan. That's in their contract. They will always issue that. And the 2-weekly work plan is got all of the information on there that allows us to populate the Nialli post-its. Some would like to go straight to the post-its and put the constraints on there. Some of them went via the 2-weekly work plan, and my management team would then populate what was left of that. And then there would be some of the gaps filled in the 2-weekly room. We'd come in here every week and do that this week, next week, and sometimes we populated it there, or when we shifted it around. And I think the convincing of them is the fact that they're getting better outputs from it. They can see that this is getting clear in their constraints, this is making the place better ready for them, this is giving them better outputs. So as soon as they start to see that we're as passionate about them being successful as they are, then they're all up for it.
Okay.
Nice.
Our next question is, this person was supposed to ask you if you are satisfied with LPS and Nialli Visual Planner, but hearing the way you talk about it, it's obvious that you do. So the question is, what is the greatest advantage of LPS and Nialli Visual Planner?
So I have used several systems, some of them a little bit more complicated and some of them easily are populated. But I have a personal passion to say there has to be a time where it's not automatic data. Somebody has to own it and populate it and bring it in. And the first question most people say, can I just transfer my whole plan into there? It won't work. You have to sit down and you have to populate it. So I actually stopped using a very good lean tool called Visualine, only because it wasn't as flexible as Nialli. It was to actually but this client's actually doubled the value of this job and doubled the project time of this job, because it gave us more and more scope, more and more work. And Nialli allowed us to do off this all the additional work plus what we had in our program, because the program creation was so far behind because it was constantly changing in scope. Actually, where we've used other tools in projects which are static, they're very effective. But I like the simplicity of Nialli, the flexibility of it, add, subtract, and all work together. And seeing the operatives up on the screen just twisting, the tags and get buying into it, I like it for its simplicity and flexibility.
Okay. Our next question is, do you require trade partners to have and use total stations when utilizing BIM? What's your best practice for setting control for BIM? And do you find BIM effective if the model isn't completed in pre-construction?
So none of them really are ever completed. The most I will get in the REBA British will be a stage 3, and I'll take that to stage 4 and stage 5. And normally that's where I pick up a lot of the clashes. The total station would really be just for the setting out on site, and every contractor has to go back to the set coordinates so that nobody puts mistake on mistake. So yes, they would have total stations. And yes, we would develop that model through, and every stage goes further, we get less and less clashes. And getting rid of the clash in the virtual world versus the real world to us is, as many as we can, please. On the field, it takes far too long.
Our next question is, and we're going back to Nialli here, which elements of the Last Planner system are fully supported? Phase planning, look ahead, weekly work planning, daily huddles?
Yeah, so you can pull plan into Nialli, and you will stand there and you put your durations in and you get yourself and this is normally to a concentrated area as opposed to the whole thing. So a lot of it is done bringing in the plan that we've agreed, but then the pool plan will be, we need to concentrate on this. What can we do better? What can we do differently? And that becomes the top half of Nialli. and in the bottom half you drag that down and you put it in, so it automatically becomes your post-its. So that's a real good feature of it. But yeah, normally I do that for a concentrated area as opposed to the whole lot.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, Eileen. The structure is very much should, can, will, do, and then did, of course, the learning after. So totally modeled on the I'll just say macro phases of LPS. So.
The 5 connected conversations. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
So we're almost out of time, but there's one thing that I want to ask each of you, and Alan and Steve, from different points of view here. And Alan, I'm going to start with you this time. What is the one thing that you think people should get out of this webinar about Nialli? What's the aha moment, the takeaway?
I think we're very, like in my, I look at, the design of our product and what we should be building, and we have a North Star. We call it a North Star, and that's all about what you just mentioned: connected conversations, the whole visual mapping, absolute simplicity, self-evident simplicity. I walk in and my subcontractors know how to use this. Everybody knows what a Post-it, know how to use it, and so it's very, very. I call it really low, zero time to value. So I think that if you're looking for something like that, we're very focused on the job site and getting things done together.
Steve, before you answer that question, we have another one that just came in. Do you use your CPM schedule for the initial Nialli input, tact planning?
So that's just what I mentioned earlier about if we did the actual program and just imported it, which everybody asks and everybody wants, and it automatically populates the post-its. That's not a feature, albeit you can import through Excel and you can transfer, and it is a roundabout way of doing it. But I very much do my planning from scratch on Nialli, using those 2-weekly work plans, which are all trade by trade, and then we populate the areas, and each lane's a different part of those areas, each license is a different area, and that's how we start to populate it, and then we can add and subtract to it. But I don't like automatically just populating them, because nobody's committed to that, nobody's behind it. I like to see it to be that contractor saying, I will do it in 5 days with 5 operatives, and I won't let you down.
Nice.
So Steve, now I'm going to make you ask that question. What is the aha moment? The one thing you think people should take away about your experience using Nialli?
So the part I always say is you won't get naturally some of the site managers wanting to show their working out. We almost hide it because we don't want to reveal just what that percentage is, how successful we are. But it is a measure of a great manager, and if you can increase it, yeah, that person becomes better and better at it, and the planning ahead becomes more efficient, and they get so much satisfaction out of being able to do it. So for me, when I go into a room and I see a manager going from 56% to 70% to 86% and getting up there with the other ones, you're training them, you're learning, and you're able to guide them as well. Other than that, you don't know what's in their head. They could just be sitting in the cafe all day, but that's for me is there's no hiding from this, and I'd love to see the people that say this is what we should be doing, more of this.
Well, thank you all for attending. We are out of time. Again, thank you to the group here for presenting. Again, thank you for attending. I'll get it right. The first webinar in our exhibitor preview webinar series. Stay tuned for the next ones. This is being recorded. A copy of the recording will be available on our Congress website. Go to the Nialli logo. You'll see watch webinar underneath when it's ready to go. Thank you so much, everybody. We will see you on our next webinar. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you, Laura. Thanks, Alan. Cheers.
Yep. Thanks, Steve.